Dr. Jazz.
I wanted to ask you first to start the talk with you and pop acts. Like, I mean, pop acts, like folk music or whatever. Like, how did you get involved into this? Like, and playing, I think Marcus Mumford this time, and you played like with, I know you did like Paul Simon one event and Andrew Bird, I think. But like, how did you get involved in this scene?
Yeah. There's a great bass player here in Seattle named Jeff Johnson.
Oh, sure.
And he played with Philly Joe Jones back in the day, and many people. But when you ask him, "Hey Jeff, how's it going?" he just looks at his bass and says, "I'm just following this thing around."
That's a good one.
And so, to answer your question, I kind of feel like it's that. It's like we play this music and we show up in these situations and we meet people and we try to do a great job, try to play the music in a way that feels authentic, whatever that is for each of us, and people take note of that. And so with regards to, I mean, my kind of big foray into the indie rock pop world really kind of started with Andrew Bird. And I met him through the bassist Todd Sikafus.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And Todd's a great bass player, composer, band leader. And I was living in New York at the time and playing in Todd's band, the Tiny Resistors was the name of that project. And Todd knew Andrew, and Andrew came and sat in with us. We were playing a concert at LPR, Le Poisson Rouge, on Bleecker Street. And I didn't know who Andrew was at the time, but it was like, wow, who's this whistling violinist joining the band for this? And the gig was fun and came and went. And then some years later, Andrew just called me up because he was changing up his band, and he had remembered that show that we did.
Oh wow!
I remember really remembered our musical connection, and he filed that away. Like, well, when the time is right, when things change for me and my band, I want to try things out with Ted. And so he called me up, and that was in 2013, I guess, probably. Yeah, we've been playing together ever since.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so then, of course, from there, then I worked on the first thing we did was make a record, which was called Are You Serious, that Tony Berg produced at Sound City. And Blake Mills was playing guitar on that session. And I don't know if you know Blake, but he's just incredible, good guitarist and very prolific producer in his own right. Yeah. And so Blake and I hit it off and, became friends and stayed in touch through music. And Blake signed me to his record label. He has an imprint on Verve Records, and we've worked on other projects together. Anyways, that's how one thing just kind of leads to another, and you find the people that you resonate with, and at that point, genre doesn't have anything to do with it,
Yeah. But how is it like for you? When I have you on some of these records, jazz-wise, let's call it, you're incredibly fluid and creative, I think, all the time, like this airy type of a vibe, at least how I hear you. I don't know how to describe it, but like, and then when you play like, with something that's more structured, how do you make yourself at home there, actually, during a tour or a gig?
Yeah. I really like moving between those worlds. It really feels like it's just different dialects or different collections of vocabulary are required. You know, no matter what I'm playing, I'm always striving to play from a perspective of just hearing what I'm playing. So I'm trying to just imagine what I wish the drums to do right now, and then hope that I can translate that to the actual objects in front of me, you know, but from my imagination, from my ears. And so the challenge then is just can you imagine a great part for this music right now? And again, that then genre doesn't really have anything to do with it. It's just whether or not you feel like you have something to say in this room or this room. I think sometimes, you know, when you go to a pop or rock situation, sometimes people think of that, oh, well, the music is more simple. It's the beat, you have to play the beat the same every measure or whatever. It's like, and I don't think of it that way. It doesn't make sense to me, because there's something incredibly complex about having to set the feel for the vocalist just right every night, and it's different. And the presence and level of control that you have to make the rhythms and the sounds and the blend of your kit, it's infinitely complex, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
And I love that. And to me, it reminds me of, you know, my favorite jazz records. Actually, that's what's happening, you know, when Roy Haynes plays a really slow tempo with, say, Phineas Newborn on We 3, you know, that record with Paul, he's playing a part the same way. That's the same challenge that I'm faced on, you know, playing for this song, I think. And so I take a lot of inspiration from that. And I've enjoyed how being a member of these, you know, playing for these singers in this other genre, I take, you know, what I'm learning in that, I take that back to the bandstand in these more open improvisatory situations. And I really enjoy the sort of the resonance between the two. Yeah.
No, it's not even, you know, I had like in October now also like a 17-day tour, and I was thinking during the tour, like, I don't know about pop music or more, not necessarily pop, but, you know, not jazz music, but that even jazz, it's not so much different in a sense that we always play ahead. I mean, of course you have, if you're not playing completely improvised, but we still have a structure also. And okay, on that improvised moments when there's a solo, of course we're free, but still we're following a structure. And it's, even I was thinking about you, like playing with Monder, you know, it's, of course you're free to do, but it's like really a fixed structure that you're playing actually. And it's quite similar actually, both things in a way, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. You kind of have an agreement in the band, whether it's spoken or unspoken. You feel a thread that moves through everything that you do and gives context to your choices. Yeah,
definitely. No, but you know, I listened to the other day to Brian Blade also playing with Seal. Just man, you know, it's kind of this pop rock music, but he's just like, woo, you know. Or Steve Gadd was another master, like all these guys, like Jim Keltner or whoever.
Yeah, I was just thinking of Jim. Yeah, like there's so much room for actually wild creativity within these situations that sometimes get painted with a broad brush as like simple, you know. And just masterful. Not to mention the tones that like someone like Jim Keltner would find on the drums, and the way to tune and treat the drums, and the imagination required to say, I'm going to collect these tones to present this song, and use them in this way. Yeah, it's really, really inspiring.
Yeah. You mentioned before Roy Haynes and you know, the We3 record. Like, what was drumming wise for you? One of the few records or drummers, I guess, Roy Haynes, Elvin Jones, like. But when was the moment that you actually decided for yourself, like, okay, shit, I want to explore this improvisational jazz world a little bit more? You remember that?
Yeah. I was pretty young. I mean, I started playing drums. I don't really remember when I started playing drums. My parents would tell me I was sort of around 2 years old.
Okay.
And I guess the concert that really switched it on for me was a Horace Silver concert. I grew up in Rochester, New York, Western New York, and so they took me to see this concert that was meant to be outdoors on the lawn of the art gallery, but there was a bad thunderstorm, and they crammed too many people into a small auditorium, and I guess we ended up right next to the band.
Oh wow.
And I don't know who was playing drums at the time. It could have been Billy Hart. I don't know. I asked him about it at one point. Yeah. Anyways, after that, I went home and made kitchen percussion with pots and pans and oatmeal canisters and wooden spoons. And anyways, I kind of stuck with it ever since. But I do think that some of my earliest memories of jazz records, I mean, certainly Philly Joe Jones with the Miles Davis Quintet, those 1950s records.
Yeah.
That like the sound of Philly Joe's snare drum, like that's a very vivid memory, I think, of when I first heard that. I was like, whoa, like that rocks really hard, and it's so funky, and and just the sound of it was just so full and beautiful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember my dad playing A Love Supreme for me. I was fortunate to have parents that were into a lot of different types of music. And as I learned that my dad was is a drummer in his own right. And he wasn't really playing at the time when I got into it. He had played in a band out of college in the Hudson Valley. But he got back into it with me, and we would play together, and he would play some piano or some guitar, and back to like the crossover to rock and roll. He was also a big fan of the band, Levon Helm on drums, and Creedence Clearwater Revival, and Jackson Browne, and Linda Ronstadt, and Bonnie Raitt. So there was classic rock. There was a classic rock element as well, and so we'd play Blue Monk, and then we would play a song by the band or CCR.
That's quite cool. Okay.
Yeah, so I guess now that I think about it, I was kind of doing both from an early age. Just kind of, it was just all music to me.
Yeah, well, it is anyway. Yeah, in the end.
Yeah, well, yeah, not just to me actually.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I hate also. I spoke once with Tim Byrne, and he really got into this anti-genre thing. That he hates that, and which makes sense. It's basically just for people to find a type of music in a store or what you're searching for, I guess. Yeah. It's all music. Yeah.
Yeah, or I mean, I share that complaint myself. I think the other extension of that is that when people go to be musicians, the easier thing to do is to say, I play this type of music.
Yeah.
I play this style, and I don't play that style. And the result can be that people work to be proficient at a style, but they don't do the work to dig deep and find something authentic that of course will transcend any style, and that's the real work that I think we all have to do to play real music. And once you do that, you realize, well, I've gone through my life having all of these experiences. I didn't have experiences in one style my entire life. It's, we all have these unique collections of experiences, and we draw on that. We try to connect those to the sounds that we make. And so at that point, style has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the other day I was browsing to Vinnie Colaiuta's discography. I mean, there's like a Megadeth record he did, the thrash metal band. I was like, really?
Wow, yeah.
And I went to listen to it, and I was like, man, he's actually playing drums on that, and it sounds authentic, incredible. It's like,
Cool. I had to check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. And then he does, all the jazz stuff or whatever, but it's quite bizarre. But Tad, I wanted to ask you, like, how did you decide then to go to Eastman? What was the main trigger to study jazz, actually? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think that throughout grade school and then into, high school, I pretty much was decided that I wanted to be a musician and play drums, and that quickly just meant moving to New York City and being a jazz musician in New York City. Like that kind of was always the goal. And so I played a lot of music in high school, of course, in my school bands. I had an amazing band director who was actually my next door neighbor, Mark Borden. He recently retired and is enjoying a well-deserved retirement. And he didn't have a background in jazz, but there were a couple of us that were really into it and took to it really well. And so he learned with us and created just an amazing, very open culture at the school to explore the music. It was just so supportive, enthusiastic, and worked so hard to find us opportunities and connect us with other peers around the region. So, and then also, this was in a town just south of Rochester, and when we moved there when I was 10 or 11, we also met Fred Sturm, who was head of the Eastman Jazz Ensemble, and his son Ike, who became his friend in school and then in New York as well. We both ended up in New York. Great bass player, and Ike was going to school. He's a few years older than me, but we met in the school jazz ensemble, and Fred heard me play and immediately connected me with Rich Thompson, the drum instructor at Eastman. And so I started taking lessons with Rich from when I was 10 or 11 years old, I think 6th or 7th grade.
Wow.
And so then, coming out of high school, deciding where to go to school, I had some really good options. It was Eastman, Manhattan School of Music, the New School, and NEC in Boston. And it was really between, I think, for me at the time, between Eastman or one of the New York City schools. And I just decided, I knew I wanted to go to New York, but I was a little afraid to do that as a college student.
Yeah.
I just thought I think I'll wait and go to school elsewhere and then go to New York. I think in hindsight, it worked for me. It's not to say that it couldn't have been great, of course, from that early age. But I also, being in Rochester, I knew the scene at Eastman quite a bit. I was going up to play. I would go sit in with, there's a student run like Mingus big band, like playing Mingus repertoire. I would go to Java's coffee shop and hear the early versions of Knee Body play.
Really?
Band.
So
because some of those, Cave and Adam Benjamin, some of those folks were at Eastman at a time. So I just got a really good sense of what was going on there, and I was excited to really join that student body. It seemed really open, and it was, and that worked out.
Yeah, and you mentioned you were scared of going first to New York as a student, but like after finishing Eastman, how was it for you? Like, being 20, 22, 23, coming to New York, where everyone was like, who were the first connections, and how did you kind of slowly dig into the scene? Like, how was that for you?
Yeah. I mean, leading up to it, of course, it's terrifying. There's no way around it. It's hard to imagine how it's going to go. You just don't know. And so you have to. I think that's a very formative experience that those of us that choose to move to New York to be a musician, like, it's almost like a rite of passage. I think, the things that you learn about yourself when you're faced with that seemingly insurmountable challenge of how do I survive here, and why would anybody call me? You know, and you know, these other incredible musicians. But you know, I think there were two things. There was already a community of musicians that had gone to Eastman in New York that had moved in the years prior. And then the good thing about Eastman being relatively close to New York City, we were like a 6-hour drive. We would have guest artists come up and work with us, either with the big band or in small groups as well. And Maria Schneider had been up my freshman year, and I worked with her in the big band, and then really the one my junior year, Ben Monder came up.
That's how that happened. Okay, I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that's how I met Ben. Really was I think that was, I mean, really a student idea. Like, hey, we want to have Ben up as a guest artist, and so he came up, and we were already checking out his records. You know, the records with Jim Black on drums.
Flux and Dust. Yeah, I love that stuff.
Like, Excavation. Yeah, right. Yeah. Ben Street on some, then Schooley and Theo Blackman singing on. And we were really checking out those records, and it was such an amazing combination of composed, like very intricate composed material and very improvisatory expression of that very meticulously composed material. It's just, I remember first friend playing one of those records for me the first time, and I knew that I liked it, but I didn't know what to think of it. I couldn't understand it, and it was such a fun ride, getting, you know, kind of pulling back the curtains into that music. And so anyways, Ben came up, and I got to play some trio with him and Ike, actually. Ike Sturm, the bass player. He was at Eastman, and so Ben and I hit it off, and we kept in touch. And the next year, I guess it was, Ben called me up and invited me to come play a show at the Mercury Lounge with Stomu Takeshi was playing bass on that. And so we played a trio show of Ben's music, and Stomu was already playing with Cuong Vu at the time, great trumpet player.
Sure.
And Cuong was looking for a drummer, and Stomu recommended me to Cuong, and then Cuong called me, and then I think I was still in school, just about to finish up school, and I went to New York, and we just did a rehearsal at a rehearsal studio in Midtown, and we just improvised really the most of it. And I just remember that feeling amazing. Like, the improvisation it felt indestructible. Like it just, those guys had so many ideas and made my ideas sound so good. The music just went full steam ahead. Never, you know, sometimes when you improvise with people, there's moments of like awkwardness. Where's this going musically? And just remember, I didn't feel any of that. So then, all to say, when I arrived at New York, I kind of had joined Ben Monder's band and Cuong Vu's band. And right away, you know, going to play at the 55 bar with Ben Monder at that time was like, people took note of that, you know. It's like, whoa, okay, check this guy out. And so that was a very fortunate kind of validation in my first days there in New York. And you know, like the community kind of quickly branches out from there.
No, it's already had like two connections.
Most of it back to Ben.
No, if you have already this smoother landing connections, then it's easier, I guess, than just coming there and just like, okay, I'm this guy, and that's cool. Because I think the first I heard you was like on Oceana, that record, and you know, I know you said you checked out Ben's music, and you know, me being a guitarist, of course, I'm, you know, I'm trying to always to cope with 6 bars of his. I ordered the composition books, and you know, I check it out and blah blah blah. And it's just, I find it amazing. I wanted to ask you that as a drummer, how do you cope like with or how did you guys rehearse, or especially you, like a 27-page composition, and you constantly changing small changes in between or bigger or whatever, and like how did you do that in the beginning? I mean,
yeah, that Oceana was the first record I did with Ben, and there was a lot of rehearsing, and we would rehearse at Kermit Driscoll's house in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and he would make really strong coffee, and we would rehearse for hours at a time, mainly just the trio, not with Theo. Theo kind of came in later, because until we had our shit together, he couldn't do anything, because music is so hard. And yeah, that it was just it was a very challenging record to put together, and I think we all learned a lot from it. And we would play they got to a point where we played gigs. We'd play at the 55 Bar, Cornelia Street Cafe, playing those compositions, and yeah, so it was such a challenge. You felt like at times you're just on a tightrope, just trying not to fall to your death. And there's so many things working against you, including just managing the paper. I remember thinking, like, I was so smart. I was having problems with the tape ripping, and then the pages would get messed up. So I had some really heavy duty tape. But when you tape 27 pages together it becomes like a spring.
Yeah.
And I remember turning the page and like an accordion exploding, the paper just went on stage, and like I'm trying to play one-handed. Well, the meter's changing every moment. I remember Ben looking back like, what the hell is going on back there? I'm trying to pick up
so
paper.
Cool.
Anyways, yeah, and we managed to get it down finally at Brooklyn Recording, with Andy Taub, and let's see, that was like, it was just an incredible learning experience, and I think we gained some pretty ruthless skill from that process. I know I did, of how to deal with all of these constantly shifting meters. Every measure is a different meter, and trying to find shapes in the music, because my job was to deal with the nitty-gritty of the syncopation of the guitar and bass parts throughout all of these changing meters, while still helping shape the larger phrases where Theo is singing and floating above it. So yeah, an amazing challenge to try and trying to serve the music that way. I learned so much from it, and when it came time to do Hydra, the next one, it was much easier. Actually, it came together much faster. Yeah. So I guess we got better.
No, it's incredible. Yeah, when I listen to that, it's just, especially you as a drummer, it's because the drum part is not written, of course. So it's basically bass and vocals and guitar. So you have to kind of be creative within that jungle of notes and changing meters. So it's like, what was your approach there, or even now, let's say, how do you approach a thing like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to the records before I joined, I mean, I think I could hear and understand, just on a general level, like what Ben wanted to do with his music, and hearing how Jim Black interpreted it really, gave me the keys to like open the door, and then take it and do with it what I wanted to. But back to the beginning of our conversation, like the idea of there's language or vocabulary. I could kind of sense what collection of ideas Ben was more or less working with. And of course there was room to inject new ideas, but I guess maybe more specifically what we're talking about is combining some kind of like rock sensibilities, like the there's an aesthetic there of heavier drumming that's certainly at times present in Ben's music, whether that's kind of going into the Meshuggah death metal, and drawing from that, or classic rock, and then combining that with more painterly, expressionistic, playing. I guess I kind of had a handle on those elements, and it made sense to me, and so I could work with that. But Ben really didn't often tell me things too specifically. I mean, if something was going in a direction he didn't like, he was very quick to recognize that. But I think we were kind of speaking the same language.
Yeah. I love those two records, man. It's just like,
oh, thank you.
I mean, the music, and it's just like I say, you float through that. Sounds so effortlessly, but I know it's only like it's
Well, one thing I did learn that I still think about is like, there's so much information on the page, and I think part of the job that I had as the drummer was to like confront all that information, but it's not like I just play what's on the page. Sometimes I more or less would, but the job was to like imagine what's not actually on the page that will provide the right context for all of this stuff.
Makes sense.
And I think that's something that we all is required of us in any of the music we play. Is like, imagine, well, what's not being said right now. And that's an interesting challenge.
Makes sense. And around at the same time, you did all around, right? I mean, also with band.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of band, and how did you decide? Like, speaking of band leading and composing, when did this come into equation? Like in New York, did you already start leading your bands immediately, or like was that the first project? Or
well, that record, I was still in school. I was still living in Rochester.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I think it was during my senior year, and there was a small label, if you can even call it a label, in Rochester, but they gave me a little money to go and make a record. And so it's the players are Ike Sturm on bass and Matt Blanchard, who are friends I was in school with. And in saxophone, and Eric Biondo played on a track, I think, on trumpet, and then Ben. And so I had met Ben probably 8 months prior, and asked him to do the record, and we went and had one day at Avatar.
Oh wow!
Now Power Station,
fantastic,
New York. And so I don't know. It just like I wanted to work with Ben, and Ike and Matt were like, family at that point musically. And so we drove down. I think we got up early and drove and went right to the studio, if I recall. It was pretty epic.
That's a big one,
But that was kind of that was the first recording that I made as a leader. I would occasionally lead a band around Rochester to play some shows here and there.
You like this role?
That was
leading. You like the role?
Do I like the role?
Yeah, I mean, like.
It's complicated. I do. It's just a different challenge than realizing someone else's music. I'm getting better at it in the sense that I'm able to. I think for a long time leading a band, just the occasion was very distracting, or the fact that it was my music. I had brought these people together. But I brought a lot of baggage to the situation because of it, and couldn't necessarily hear the music as kind of objectively as I could when I just sat down to play with somebody else. I realized that when I was a sideman, just the decisions sometimes were just much clearer. could be more irreverent in a good way with the music. And so yeah, so I'm getting better and better at that. I've been doing a lot more of it in the last couple of years, despite the pandemic, with this duo project with Cuong Vu on trumpet. So we've a project where it's just the two of us playing relatively new compositions of mine, and I'm also playing some analog synthesizers with the drums. One in particular where I actually have a mallet keyboard that plays the synth, so I don't have to put a stick down. I can play some bass notes. Yeah, just that was really born out of being stuck at home in the pandemic and trying to be able to hear melodies in the room when I was the only one there, and play the drums and combine that with Cuong, and it's been fun.
Will you guys record it or release it like in the future? Or?
Yeah, I'm very slowly starting to plan my next record, the follow-up to the record called "You Already Know."
Yeah, I want to ask you about that one. Yeah, also.
Yeah, so I'm sure that Cuong will be involved. I'm kind of, one thing I'm grappling with is the type of record I want to make. Like, on the one hand, we sometimes record where it's like really a Polaroid picture of what happened. Like this performance happened in this room, and it's recorded beautifully, and now you can listen to it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to maybe take a little bit more produced approach, where maybe centered around a performance, experimenting with larger orchestrations.
Oh wow, beautiful!
Beyond just a one small ensemble performing the compositions. So I haven't figured out what that framework is yet. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Oh, but you already know. I listened to it, and it's such a beautifully produced record. And I'm such a huge fan of Andrew, by the way, D'Angelo. I mean, I did this talk with him, and we laughed so much. And he's such a nice guy, and such a player. And how did you hook up with Andrew? Actually, I mean, he's like an older generation, and but you seem to have like amazing chemistry when you did that one. So.
Yeah. Thank you. No, yeah, I mean, I had played with Andrew in a few different situations in New York City over the years. And he was coming through Seattle. This is several years ago, and we kind of just on a whim said, "Hey, let's play a duo show at the Royal Room," which is Wayne Horvitz's club here in Seattle.
Yeah.
I think we ended up sort of opening for somebody else. I can't even remember who, but we played about 40 minutes and we just improvised. And man, it felt so good. Like, as you know, like Andrew's playing, it's so focused. It's like, even when you're improvising, you feel like you're playing a song that
it's like composed almost sometimes from
your whole life or something. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, so clear and so compositional. And so it was just like unlike any kind of improvisation I had done with anyone. And so we both really enjoyed that. And then I was passing through New York some months later and just called him up and said, "Hey, do you want to go try to record something?" And we went to Brooklyn Recording for a day, and we had a great day. And I think four of the performances on the record are from that first day.
Oh, really?
And we followed that up with 2 more days, maybe even a year later or 8 months later. And Andrew brought in some of his songs, and I had some of mine. And the thesis for that ended up being like, what happens when Andrew just plays the song, the melody, just sings the song, and I play the drum beat, and we enjoy all of the sonic possibilities there. With, I was really thinking about the tuning of the drums and the sonics, I've suddenly I could take up all of this sonic space, because aside from the alto saxophone, there's all this room, especially in the low end, to think about tuning the bass drum and resonant toms and all that stuff. So it's just kind of trying to enjoy all of the harmony that I could find on my instrument and put it into a good part, and juxtapose that with Andrew just presenting the song in a way that only he can.
It's incredible. Definitely. No, it's a beautiful one. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and then once Blake and the label and Verve became involved, then the question was, do we just? I mean, we could have just left it as these bare duets, but it seemed like there was maybe an opportunity to illuminate the compositions a little bit further with some overdub, some orchestration, some piano, some strings, various instruments here and there. And so I'm really happy with Blake. Was so good at keeping the focus on me and Andrew in the track, and any additional element was really just very peripheral and supportive, and then would recede and back to the duet.
It's not overproduced in a sense. I think all these additions serve the music. Actually, it's like you said, it's still a duo in a sense. So
yeah, he had such a clear. I mean, there were times in the studio when we would add something, and I would get so excited to hear it. I would want to. Well, what if we also add this? And he was really good at making sure we didn't clutter the track with things that we didn't need. And there was one image that we had as a kind of a guiding principle, which was like, if you were to imagine Andrew and me on the stage, on a big stage, we're there in the center playing together, and then there's like on the outside ring of the stage, just like all of these other musicians with their instruments just kind of ready, and occasionally some of them would just sort of wander up and play, and then they recede. So that's what we tried to kind of make that. Yeah,
that's a nice image. I love that.
Yeah
that would be cool, actually. A nice live gig, actually.
Right. Yeah.
That would be so amazing. Like behind the curtain, and someone shows up suddenly, like, okay, plays a line and goes, or that would be cool. Wow.
Yeah.
How did you compose tunes for that one? Like, or in general, does it take you a long time to write a tune or a composition, or like do you change it a lot, or?
Yeah, it depends on it. Kind of there's a range of in terms of the process. There were a couple that came out pretty quickly. One that took a while to kind of come into focus. That the second song, "Only You."
Only You, I love that one. Yeah, it's beautiful.
With these chords, actually, that I just had this one voicing that I kept coming back to, and a progression came out of that. But I remember it didn't have any rhythm to it for a long time, and then I remember I teach at the University of Washington, and I had a little bit of time to kill before a student concert. I was in my office at the piano playing these chords, and then I would play the chord, and I started to like play on my lap, and then that beat kind of came out of that, and suddenly it was like, oh, the chord, it kind of clicked, like this beat that I had in my body suddenly found its way to these chords. And then playing it with Andrew, of course, he's just playing the top voice of the chord. And it's just this melody, this repetitive melody against the beat.
I love that.
Yeah. Other ones came out pretty quickly. And I brought them to the session, and then a couple of them I wrote. Trying to think. I know Push Pull. I really was thinking about. That was for the second session. I was thinking about what we were doing, and we needed something with some tempo to it. So I wrote that, for us to try, specifically for me and Andrew to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. Otherwise, I just wanted to ask you that not to take too much of your time. I know you're preparing the celebrations, but just we talked about Ben's music, and we mentioned Cuong, and I think I saw you with him in Vienna in Porgy and Bess, like shit, that must have been like 13, 14 years ago, maybe.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
And his music is, of course, it's also composed, but it's completely different, much more improvisational and open in a sense than, let's say, Ben's.
Yeah.
But how was it like for you? How do you see the development with him? I think you have like an amazing chemistry going on, and especially what did those additions? I think you played with some of the greatest guitarists ever, with Frisell and Mettini adding them. Like, how did those stories happen? I mean, I know Cuong played with Mettini, that's natural, but like especially the Frisell, I love that record with Bill. I mean, that's
we did that record in it was probably 2005, maybe. Is that right? I'll have to look. Yes. It's pretty early on into the time that I had joined Cuong's band, and I don't recall how Cuong knew Frisell at that time. There might have been a Seattle connection. We were going, that's probably what it was. Bill was living in Seattle at the time. Up until relatively recently, he
moved back,
which was a huge loss for us here in Seattle. Cuong was just looking for a guitar voice, and I mean, nothing I can add to say about Bill, because he's just he's so incredible, and when he came into our world, so it's Stomu and Cuong and I had this trio. We were this trio animal, really, and Bill came right in and just pried it open and made it feel exciting and comfortable, and like he was instantly a member of the band. Just like an unbelievable musician. And so we sort of would, with Cuong, we'd have the trio that was always working, and we could play these songs in a trio setting, but then Cuong was really enjoying bringing in additional member. So whether that was guitar, we did a trio with Mark Ducray, with Dave Husinski.
How was with Ducray? Man,
incredible.
Is that recorded?
Yeah. We didn't make a record. No, we just did a tour. We did 2 weeks in Europe. Yeah.
Ducray's like he's my hero.
Amazing. Yeah. What a unique musician. Yeah. And then we did some with Chris Speed also, and we did a record with Chris. And then obviously the record with Mettini, that was equally amazing and different. It was just all these really remarkable musical personalities coming into trios world, and enjoying navigating that and finding our quartet sound.
I find it really interesting how Frisell and Mettini are completely different stories and completely different worlds, yet it's the same band kind of, and it's really interesting to hear.
Really beautiful. We got a kick out of that for sure, of just like feeling how the trio would respond to these very different personalities coming in.
Just on that, like, what's your future plans for next year? Like, do you have some projects coming up, or as a leader or as a sideman? Like, what's the touring schedule looking like? And
I mean, I just got off a lot of touring with Andrew Bird and Marcus Mumford, and some stuff of my own. But actually, in just over a week, I'm going down to Los Angeles to play with Schofield and Larry Goldings, and the Scary Goldings Project, as a folk band, with Schofield. So I'm going to join that crew for a show. So I can't wait for that, to be honest. Wow.
How did that happen?
Then beyond that, just through knowing some of the some of the folks in that band, the Scary Pockets, Scary Golding's band. So I know Larry a bit, and Ryan Lerman, the guitarist there. So they hit me up to join.
Fantastic! I hope there's going to be recorded or something, like a video or.
I hope so too. They typically do either film or record their stuff. I want to hear that.
So, super.
Yeah, so I'm doing my homework now. Learning all the tunes. Also, Will Lee is going to play bass. I'm really psyched to get to play with him for the first time. So it's going to be a great band. Should be a party. Then I'm really trying to carve out time to compose and start to record, whether it's a demo or maybe it is the record. I'm not, just to kind of start to take a step in a direction and see how that feels. I think I need to, it's time to do that. So and there's always more dates with Andrew Bird coming up in next year, and then you never know who's going to call. That's the exciting thing about you. It's like like I said earlier, just following the drums around. We'll see.
It's a nice, cool. Yeah. Right, man. Thanks so much. Thanks for taking the time today. So I appreciate it. And
my pleasure, man. Thank you for the time and interview.